as we get into our devotional here, I'm going to be looking at a few verses in the Gospels, and just thinking about Jesus going to the cross, and something that was coming to my mind as I was reading through the different gospel accounts this afternoon. It can appear on first reading that Jesus kind of went to the cross as a victim and was taken advantage of by the men who came to take him in the garden, the scribes and the chief priests and all the people that were against him. But I was, as I was reading, it came to my mind just, Christ wasn't. Yes, he was a victim in the sense that he was innocent and he didn't do anything to deserve this death, and he was the innocent one dying for the guilty. But he was truly in control and victorious in his death and in the path to the cross. And I thought these three things kind of came to mind, and a few verses that relate to these statements. But Christ wasn't captured, he was in control. Christ wasn't convicted, he confessed the truth. And Christ wasn't killed, he committed his spirit. So that first one, Christ wasn't captured, he was in control. Looking at Mark chapter 14. Mark chapter 14, verses 48 through 49. And this is when they've come to seize him in the garden. Judas has come up to him. He's betrayed him. He's kissed him. And they've laid their hands on him and taken him. And Jesus says in verse 48, "Then Jesus answered and said to them, Have you come out as against a robber with swords and clubs to take me? I was daily with you in the temple, teaching, and you did not seize me. But the scriptures must be fulfilled." And Jesus, in his statement, is just pointing out to them how, and maybe in their eyes, they had this devious plan to use Judas, and Judas betrayed them. He was seeking an opportunity to betray Jesus, and probably telling them he always goes to this garden to pray and you can get him there. And Jesus, yes, he was there. He was alone with his disciples. He was, in their eyes, now he's in a vulnerable position. But Jesus was allowing all of this to happen. He points out to them, you could have taken me anytime. You could have come and I was in the temple with you. I was publicly around you and doing my ministry, and you could have come and seized me and taken me, but it wasn't my time. It wasn't his hour yet. Now that it is his hour, he is giving up himself to them. He was in complete control of the situation, because it wasn't until the time when it was right, when God the Father had instructed Jesus to go to the cross. Now is the time when he's going to allow himself to be captured. They tried to throw him off. This was earlier in his ministry. The people of Nazareth tried to throw him off the cliff because of his claims of being God, and Jesus passed through the midst of them. So he was able to hold that off, his death, until the time was right. And then in John chapter 19. And verse 11. Actually, going back a bit to John chapter 18 first. Let's go there first, and then we'll go to John chapter 19. John chapter 18 first. When they come into the garden, in verse 3, Judas, having received a detachment of troops and officers from the chief priests and Pharisees, came there with lanterns, torches, and weapons. A whole huge group of people coming with their weapons to take Jesus prisoner. Jesus, therefore, knowing all things that would come upon him, and he knows what he's going to. He knows what is going to happen to him. He went forward and said to them. He didn't run and hide. He didn't run away. He didn't avoid this. It was the time for him to come. And he said, "Whom are you seeking?" They answered him, "Jesus of Nazareth." Jesus said to them, "I am he." And Judas, who betrayed him, also stood with them. Now when he said to them, "I am he," they drew back and fell to the ground. And that is a very interesting statement, that when Jesus said that, this whole detachment of troops with their torches and their swords and spears, they all fell back to the ground. Just the power of the words of Jesus Christ to say, "I am he." It's the indication of his divinity, identifying himself with, "I am the Father." But here he's showing them, you've come out to take me as your prisoner. And with one statement, with two words, he's knocked them back to the ground, just to show them who really is in control. And then he asked them again, "Whom are you seeking?" And they said, "Jesus of Nazareth." Jesus answered, "I have told you that I am he. Therefore, if you seek me, let these go their way." Which they did. And they did what Jesus said. And that was a fulfillment of the scripture that the shepherd would be struck, but the sheep would be scattered. But then going over to John chapter 19, when he stands before Pilate, Pilate says in verse 10, "Are you not speaking to me?" This is after all these accusations are being made, and Jesus is not saying anything. And Pilate's saying, "Are you not speaking to me? Do you not know that I have power to crucify you and power to release you?" He's thinking he holds Jesus' life in his hands. Jesus answered, "You could have no power at all against me unless it had been given you from above. Therefore, the one who delivered me to you has the greater sin." But that first statement is clearly showing that Pilate did not have the power in the situation. He did not have the true power. It had been given him by God to do this, but it was fulfillment of God's will for Jesus to die for the sins of the world. So Christ was in control in this part of his path to the cross. Even though it could seem like he was a prisoner, a victim, he was truly in control as God. And then the second point, Christ wasn't convicted, he confessed the truth. Going back to Mark chapter 14, when he's standing trial, verses 50, 55 and following. "Now the chief priests and all the council sought testimony against Jesus to put him to death, but found none. For many bore false witness against him, but their testimonies did not agree. Then some rose up and bore false witness against him, saying, 'We heard him say, I will destroy this temple made with hands, and within 3 days I will build another made without hands.' But not even then did their testimony agree." So they're bringing up all these false accusations against Jesus. And even when they're repeating something that he said, which he did say, even then they can't even get their accusations to match up. And so Jesus is standing there not saying anything. You got all these people, these false witnesses being brought up, and they're trying to point out what he did wrong, and nothing is sticking. No accusation is against him is sticking. None of them are true. And he was innocent of anything. And the only thing that they're trying to accuse him of, and finally feel like they accomplished their mission in accusing him of this, is of him claiming to be God and to be the Messiah, the Son of God. And here in verse 60, "And the high priest stood up in the midst and asked Jesus, saying, 'Do you answer nothing? What is it these men testify against you?' But he kept silent and answered nothing. Again, the high priest asked him, saying to him, "Are you the Christ, the Son of the Blessed?" Jesus said, "Now Jesus speaks. He says, I am, and you will see the Son of Man sitting at the right hand of the power and coming with the clouds of heaven." And that makes the high priest and the religious leaders tear their clothes, and they call it blasphemy. But Jesus was just confessing what was true. He didn't answer any of the accusations. He didn't defend himself. He didn't try to interrupt them and say, "No, that's not true." He just sat there silently until he was asked the question, "Are you the Christ, the Son of God?" And he confessed the truth. So Jesus was convicted of nothing. He truly was the Son of God. It wasn't blasphemy for him to say that. And in the face of all these accusations, he remained silent, but then confessed that he truly is God. And then lastly, Christ wasn't killed. He committed his spirit. John chapter 19, verse 30. So it says, when Jesus had received the sour wine, he said, it is finished. And bowing his head, he gave up his spirit. And in another verse, in one of the other Gospels, it says Pilate was surprised at how quickly he had died. He wasn't expecting him to die that soon, because that was usually a long, long death. But Christ, even though they did nail the nails into his body and they hung him on the tree, on that cross, Jesus still chose the time when he had completely fulfilled what God the Father had required of him to be that offering for sin. Once he had given his body, once he had given his blood, he said, "It's finished." And then he gave up his spirit. He committed his spirit to God. And so, as we think about Jesus Christ dying on the cross, on his way to the cross, can see how Christ was the victor in control of his death. And he was not a victim in the sense that he was a victim in the sense that he was innocent, but in the sense that he was in control of his end, the true end that he had come to earth for. He was a victor. And so as we now transition to remembering the death of Christ, I'll ask the men to come forward, Michael and Steve, if you would come forward, and we'll partake of the elements together.